Okay. Can y'all hear me? If you can, just go ahead and put it in the chat box for me, please. Awesome. Thanks, Marcy. So, hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Amanda Bruton. I
Okay, I
am
have a
the
few announcements to make first,
Sure.
Amanda, before
Okay.
we let you get started.
Floor is all yours. Sorry. A little
That's all
anxious this
right.
morning.
We love your enthusiasm. So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today's session is our first breakout in conjunction with our 2026 NABIP conference. A shout out and thank you to our sponsors for allowing us to put on a great conference, and thank you for being here today. A quick reminder of our nonprofit for the 2026 of Starts Right Here. Founder Will Keep shared his story with us during the conference as our keynote speaker. So don't forget to donate to his foundation. So as we get started today, a reminder that we ask everyone to keep themselves muted with the video off during the presentation. After the speaker starts, I'll be posting the link in the chat box that you'll need to complete in order for you to receive your continuing ed credits for this session. And each session has been approved for 1 hour. You'll need to sign in separately for each session. So there'll be a separate CE link when we start the second one. You'll see the pop-up questions, two of them throughout the session, one about halfway through and one near the end. So you'll need to make sure that you answer those. If your firewalls prevent you from answering the pop-up questions or completing the continuing ed link, please send your name and your NPN to the NABIP-IA chapter chat box, who is being monitored by Michelle Henneman today, and we will, and at the end we'll have time to answer questions. So our first speaker today is Amanda Bruton, and Amanda is the founder of the Cleveland-based Medicare Answers Now and field marketing organization dedicated to supporting insurance agents and advocating for Medicare beneficiaries. With nearly 20 years in the industry, she focuses on education, mentorship, and improving how brokers serve clients through both expertise and empathy. She is the creator of two national conferences, Miss Medicare and Medicare and Margaritas, and served as partner and creative director for the Agent Symposium at Medicarians. Amanda is also an active member of NABIP and its Medicare Advisory Group, collaborating with policymakers to address industry challenges. Recognized as a 2025 NABIP Legislative Award Momentum Maker and Educator of the Year, she is committed to expanding access to resources and elevating the role of brokers in healthcare. I haven't had enough coffee yet this morning. So, Amanda, take it away.
There we go. Thank you. I appreciate it. Other note, just as a side, in addition to, I'm also running for president-elect for this upcoming season. So stay tuned for more on that one too. Just a few things on my plate. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody for joining in. It's good to see everybody. I actually was out in person last year, and that was all sorts of fun. Just to give you guys the update with everything. Today we're going to talk about the 27 final rule and all the fun things that are going on legislatively right now in the Medicare world. There's quite a few things, some good, some bad, but for the most part, it's good as to what's been going on. A lot of that is actually due to, and a lot of the changes are actually due to efforts that you guys have submitted to me and to others within the Medicare Advisory Group about um, what you see and feedback within the Medicare field, right? So I am not going to go ahead and do a PowerPoint. Most of you know I hate them. Just because, well, they make me nuts. I'd rather go ahead and talk with you. So if you have your questions, feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A. I will go ahead and be watching that, and I do answer them real time as we are talking, just because that's just how I roll. Um, so first thing is that we just deadline for the working groups, including legislative chair, individual work group, as well as the Medicare advisory group was on the 17th. So if you did apply to be a part of the working groups, normally they'll go ahead and they will review that information and then let you know, usually about June, July timeframe, right around annual convention, as to what whether you were able to get in and were accepted or not with that. I highly recommend that you do that. I've been on the Medicare advisory group on and off for years. It is very eye-opening to the information and to actually have a firsthand look at how the legislation and regulations are built. To actively have conversations with those in Congress, their staffers, as well as various people within CMS. One of the cool wins that NABIP got as of last fall was quarterly meetings with CMS to voice what we see in the field, help direct some of the regulation, and try to solve some of the issues. Um, so there's a few things that I do want to go ahead and cover today. The first one that I'm finding as I'm teaching this year is that I want to arm you with the tools of people to follow, people to pay attention to who they are, what they're doing, any press release that they do, anything like that, because candidly, there's not a lot of really good resources for you guys to get information that's credible about what is happening in the Medicare world, which then leads to a lot of fear, a lot of speculation, and then you have social media creators that like to fearmonger and that like to guess about what is happening, and the media is not real reliable right now. So I'd rather that you know exactly what sources and places to go, where to go to get the information, right? So the first one is that there has been several updates within CMS as to points of contact. The first person, we all know about RFK, and then underneath him you have Dr. Oz. And those two are really the face of HHS, Health and Human Services. That is the overlying governing body, if you will, that executes out what Congress has put in motion. So you have Dr. Oz, you have RFK. They last August put together a healthcare, well, they put out an RFI, or request for information, for people to be nominated for a healthcare advisory group. This group is tasked with going ahead and trying to basically overhaul the US healthcare system, from Medicaid to Medicare to CHIPS, to all the various federally funded programs that are out there. This group is tasked in fixing it, or at least attempting to make a good shot at it. They just announced less than a month ago, and it was delayed. So the RFI was put out last August. The intent was to go ahead and have those positions filled by October. It ended up that they did not get filled until the end of March. What they chose is 14 people. Most of them are doctors. And then you have Tony Robbins in there, which a lot of people were like, what the hell? Him in medical doesn't make any sense. Although it does, because he's actually put out a book. He's done quite a bit in the fitness side of the puzzle. Um, I'm going to, personally, I think they need a little bit more well-rounding on the group, but for the 14 that they chose, it makes sense. There were 400 people that were nominated. NABIP did go ahead and nominate someone. That would be me. Then NAFA nominated Dwayne McFerrin. Craig Ritter was also threw his hat in the ring. But we had three very knowledgeable people that were stepped to the plate and said, "Hey, we wanted to be a part of that." Why does that matter? Because out of 400, that's pretty good, to have us there. Also, it to have it where we are speaking on behalf of the entire distribution side of these issues, right? Um, So the response came back, thanks, but no thanks. You're not one of the 15. However, they are developing subcommittee groups to work on various projects. They did ask some of us to go ahead and be part of those subgroups. And I'm waiting to hear more on that. It is a straight voluntary program. Most of those seats will be for 2 years, but this is a brand new thing that is out there that um, I'm encouraged to see the new changes. So, if you have seen in the news recently, there's quite a lot of shakeup regarding fraud. That is one of the very big things that it started with Doge coming in and looking for fraud as soon as Trump took office. I don't care which side of the aisle that you are on. I don't do politics. I talk about the issues. And the identifying of the fraud and clamping down on that is it's needed. It's needed on original Medicare as well as on the Advantage side. And specifically, when you look at the various types of fraud that is out there, it is rampant. And they need to get it stopped. So there's a few different ways that they're doing that. So underneath RFK and Oz, you have a guy by the name of Chris Klomp, and I'm gonna put the names in the chat so that way you know what how to spell them and how to look them up. But Chris Klomp went ahead and he's an IT guy, but on the healthcare side of things, not on the IT with Dell and Apple and any of that. No, 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 no. It's on the health provider side. Really cool guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him and shaking his hand a couple of times. I did go to DC shortly after CopCon to attend a Better Medicare Alliance meeting that he and the next guy that I'm going to talk about, John Brooks, were at. And basically, they are overhauling the Medicare system. And if there's one thing that you pull out of today's meeting is the understanding that the entire Medicare system, not just Med Advantage, but everything with Medicare is broken. I hope that you guys know that. But because it's been broken for a hot minute and they can't sustain it. And if you want to know more about the in the weeds about that kind of a detail, I'm happy to go ahead and give it. But the other guy that is actually managing the day to day, his name is John Brooks. Now, John has been with CMS for a hot minute. He was just promoted into his position, and he is the go-to dude, if you want, so to speak, that is really looking at how do we change or affect change for the beneficiaries. Now, with these two guys and Dr. Oz, one of the key initiatives that you will hear them say over and over and over again is that they answer to the beneficiary and they answer to the taxpayer. No one else. So that is their focus. They're not worried about the carrier. They're not worried about us. They're worried about the beneficiary and the beneficiary getting the treatment and the care that they need in an adequate way and understanding what that treatment is. So, one of the things that Chris and John in March, when I went to go see them, and you'll see this in the news, or if you've been following any of the news recently, And there's a couple of different magazines that I recommend that you read. One is Med City. Another one is Fierce Healthcare. Another one is Modern Healthcare. Stat is good also. Each one of these do have paywalls, unfortunately, so it can get a little pricey as you're watching them, but they're all credible. They all do really good research in the industry. But one of the things that they have covered in their news is that the system, the amount of people that are turning 65, those that are continuing to be Medicare eligible, Medicare was never built for this. Medicare was built for somebody turning 65 and candidly dropping dead inside of 10 years. That's candidly what it was built for. It was planned that way where the average person wasn't living until they're 100 to 105. Technology wasn't where it is right now. And you didn't have people who went to extenuating circumstances with end of life care, which is where the majority of the claims that are done come from that piece. When they're in hospice, the last 7 days that somebody is alive, the majority of the claims that are seen are in that pocket. Well, what's happening right now is that you have a lot of different pieces, parts going on in the industry, and I want to spend some time talking about all of these because if you don't understand what is affecting the why the plans are going commissionable, why the plans are not being offered, why the benefits are changing, why the providers are playing the games that they're playing. One, it makes it much harder for you to explain to a beneficiary or to a senior what the hell is going on. And then two, you can't plan for what's ahead. So I can tell you safely, this AEP is going to be just as tumultuous as it was last year. So you want to have all of your systems and your outreach and everything else set up so that that way you have the success going into AEP. It is going to be one where he who has the best time management and can do the outreach, that's the person that's going to win. Is this going to be one where you're servicing a lot of your existing clients? Unfortunately, yes. The trick is for you to go ahead and do the majority of that between October 1st and October 15th. So, what is happening? Why is this such a mess? So, one of the first things is that again, if we go back to the meeting that I was in with Chris and with John, one of the things that they said repeatedly is that we are now at a point where they need to overhaul the system and take the hit now to be able to sustain the program for tomorrow. And one of the things that they identified is, and there's a lot of buzzwords going around this year, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to touch on several of them that way you understand what that means and why. But one of the things that is going on is that Med Advantage plans specifically, the carriers, we all know over the last several years, you guys have heard about health risk assessments or HRAs, right? It's part that of a way for you to get additional money in your compensation. It is a way and how they started was that Med Advantage, the premise of Med Advantage is that carriers are going to be paid an average of 1,100 and I think it's $92 per member per month to administer Medicare benefits on behalf of the carrier. Now, that number is going to change based on where you live and how many conditions that or medical issues that you have. The more chronic conditions that you have, the more that the carrier goes back to at CMS and says, "Hey, excuse me, you need to give me more money because Mrs. Smith over here has diabetes, a heart condition, has early onset Alzheimer's, and we're going to have a ton of claims with them because we know that this is coming. So pay us more money." Okay. That is currently how the system works. Except you have some carriers, and it has been brought out over the last couple of months that you have some carriers who they will diagnose on the front end. And one of the things that hit the news recently was United went ahead and there was an audit that was done where you would go to the doctor's office, and one of the questions that the doctors ask you is, "Do you drink?" And most people that answer is, "Yeah, I do." Well, what does that look like? Well, I have drank, once, 1 to 3 times at dinner, nothing serious, but about one drink a night. What they were doing is they were coding people as alcoholics because that is considered a chronic condition. And even though it's a drink with dinner, which is culturally, especially in European cultures, that's the norm. That is one of those things that they were quoting, they were cataloging it in your chart. They were going back to CMS and saying they drink, they're alcoholics. They're not treating it. They're not doing counseling. They're not doing any kind of anything with it, but they were receiving extra money from the government because of that. And they started looking a little bit more. Well, what other things are being diagnosed, but they're not treating it? And why is the government paying for issues that they aren't treating? That makes no sense. So this is one of the things that CMS has uncovered with the carriers that they are now dialing back and going, "You can't do that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pay you based on issues that you're actually treating, not these phantom things that you're throwing in somebody's chart that aren't necessarily true." So this is one of the things that they've uncovered. The other buzzword that you should be hearing lately is called vertical integration. Vertical integration is how a lot of the carriers have gamed the system. And what I mean by that is that when an Advantage plan files their plans and their benefits for a given year, those benefits go to CMS, and CMS, the carrier has to hit a certain MLR threshold, medical loss ratio. And that's why they submit the plans in June. And basically, it goes back and forth as a ping pong to make sure that enough money is being spent on the benefits by the carrier to hit that MLR and dump enough money into to make those benefits rich enough, right? Well, what the carriers did is they went, "Okay, well, if I can only make a little bit of money on the plans based on running them through and what the MLR is, well, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at how do I control that? How can I adjust it?" So what they started doing, and this is in all lines of business, by the way, it is not just Medicare, but what they started to do is they started to buy the provider groups, buy the vendors. So the hearing, the over the counter, the vision, all of those different, the grocery, the meals, all of those different companies, they started buying them out. So then they could bill at a higher rate and make the money with those sub companies versus on the actual plan itself. That is also a problem that CMS is going, "Whoa, wait a minute here. We got to fix this." because basically what they're doing is they're inflating how much they're invoicing and then making the money that way, which again is making the medical costs go through the roof as we're seeing. So CMS has caught on to this game. The next piece that is having issues. We all know about the Inflation Reduction Act. We all know that it is an absolute mess. And when it was initially passed, it sounded good. It sounded great to have a $2,000 cap, which is now $2,100 cap, and then the beneficiary doesn't have to pay anything else. Except what ended up happening is that when they did that, they put the majority of the cost share, which previously was split between the beneficiary, the manufacturer discounts, the government, and the carrier. It was a four-way split on all of these prescription bills. Now they moved it. The majority of these claims now on these drugs, the cost of that is now shouldered by the carrier. So some of you may be going, well, they have they have hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars, in fact, they should be able to take care of it, and that's fine. Oh, but it's not. Here's the thing that most people miss. Y'all are seeing this fad about the semi-glutides, right? I mean, I don't, God, I think almost everybody I know is on them at this point. There, when you look at the Medicare space, and how those claims for those semi-glutides, which are pretty expensive, that was a $14.1 billion bill that the carrier wasn't planning on having to own. That in itself is where they went, whoa, wait a minute here. What are we going to do? And last year, you had carriers where in the last 2 years, what you've had happen is that the carriers are jockeying and messing with their formularies to go ahead and one, have a little bit more cost share to the beneficiary. But then two, if they want market share, they will adjust their drugs to go after a specific type of client, whether that is a someone that's just on high blood pressure or someone that's diabetic. Anthem went after that 2 years ago with the diabetics, and that's where they went non-commissionable in the middle of AEP, 3 weeks after AEP started. Those are things that the carrier can't see what another carrier is doing for the formulary, just like us. They can't find that out until October 1. So when they file their plans, and the benefits, pretty much they all know what everybody's benefits are going to do. They know where the bright and shiny objects are going to be, but the formulary is the one that is the sleeper. And that is what has cooked some of these carriers over the last couple of years, where they've gone, oh, okay, well, if this is the niche on how the beneficiary can save some money, they get an influx of people that want to go ahead and gravitate to that particular plan. And then what ends up happening is that they're like, wait a minute, um, we're getting too many people in. And when they blow a forecast with too much enrollment, now they're going to have a problem with the claim side of it. So we've covered IRA, we've covered how the plans are getting paid and the adjustment to that. We have upcoming changes that we need to brace for, in that the stars ratings and the metrics that are used to calculate those star ratings in the final rule, they've pulled 11 of those metrics. And how they are being judged and what that's going to do, candidly, is going to have it go to a negative swing when that continues to happen, because they got hit with lower stars ratings last year. Anytime that the stars ratings lower, You are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that are being pulled from a given product and a plan. That's benefit money. So when that happens, that's why the plans get to where they start declining their benefits. The dental benefit that was, $5,000 now becomes 1,000. The hospital bill or the hospital copay goes from $300 days 1 to 7 to it being, 350 to, 375 days 1 to 7. Those are all cause and effect, right? So another thing that's happening in the industry, and this is actually on the Advantage and on the Medicare side, you have a nasty consequence of what ACA is doing. What do I mean by that? What is happening is that you have people who are in that pocket of 60 to 65 who they have a squeaky knee or a bum hip, and their current plan on the U65 side has a deductible of, let's say, $5,000, $10,000. And rather than come up with that money that they don't have, they will deal with the pain of the knee or the hip, and they will deal with that until they get Medicare age. And the second that they turn Medicare age, that's when they go in to have it scheduled. And some people have this scheduled within a week or two of them turning 65. This has been an uptick, but the uptick right now, which some of you are like, okay, this is not new. No, it's not new, but the number of people that are doing it is new, and it's an influx. They planned for a little bit of this. They didn't plan for the amount of it coming. And between agent or beneficiaries who delayed care because of COVID, now they're delaying it because they can't afford it. And it's easier to go ahead and wait and get cortisone shots or whatever it may be to then be able to go ahead and only have to, once they turn Medicare eligible, now they only have either the Part B deductible and it's covered under their Plan G, or if they're on an Advantage plan and now they're only paying an outpatient copay. So now it's only costing them a couple $100 versus a couple $1,000. The claim is still the same, but now how it's falling is a mess. So that is also another reason why you are having, and if you do not know, the national average on Med Sup rate refresh, rate actions, whatever word you want to call it, where a couple of years ago that national average was about 5%, it is skyrocketed and it is almost 15% at this point. Some of that has to do with the GI states and the birthday rule states, which those are becoming more and more popular, which is a whole other discussion. I do not believe in those one iota because it's just creating such a mess. But the claims issues with all of this stuff is now resulting in where this average of the Med Sup is skyrocketed. So Marcy says we've saved Iowa for several years from the birthday rule, which is awesome. I am so glad that you guys did. Um, People think that it's a good idea in theory, but they don't understand the adverse selection and how it will skyrocket the rates. And then you have multiple plans that will pull out. So now where you thought where the legislators thought that it was a good idea. Um, no, because now you have less choice and it's more expensive. So much so that most older people cannot afford it, especially those that are in their 75 plus. And those are the ones that usually need it the most. Not to mention the Part D issues, right? So That's a little bit of a history about what is actually happening. Now, on the original Medicare side, some of you may be going and saying, okay, well, Med Advantage is awful with what's going on in that space when it comes to claims and benefits and all of these things. I sell I sell Med Sup, and I sell Med Sup because there's no network. And oh, by the way, um, they have the ability that have the ability of going ahead and um getting any treatment whenever you want, basically, right? There's no prior authorization really. You can go ahead and, one of the big things that there's a big issue with skilled nursing versus custodial. And the issue with that is that when someone that um is on um original Medicare, no one starts talking to beneficiaries and their loved ones about long-term care, and that custodial nursing facility care is not covered anywhere. Medicare does not cover it. Most seniors think that it is. Most seniors think that once you turn 65, you are covered and you have something that will cover you till the day you die, and there's not going to be a problem. They don't understand that it's not covered. And they don't understand the difference between custodial care, nursing, and skilled nursing. Skilled nursing, as we know, Medicare says that, hey, you're in a skilled nursing facility, there has to be an improvement of your situation in order for the skilled nursing to be to happen. So what ends up happening is that the facility says, well, we have a custodial arm. And if you go onto original Medicare, you wouldn't have to worry about this, and we can get you covered for minimal cost for extra days, up to 100 days. And that'll give you some time to figure out what you want to do and how you want to deal with this daughter of whoever is the senior. And this is going to be okay. Except it's not. And there's more and more of a light that is going on that. And there's more and more of a light regarding the original Medicare on authorization for various services that are highly, um, there's high frequency of fraud. So if you're not familiar, they came out last year and announced that they were going to put a demonstration in play for something called Wiser. And Wiser is it affects in 6 states. And what they did is that they're saying on these handful, I mean, we're not talking 10, hundreds of different codes. On these handful of codes, them being catheters or them being skin grafts, both of which have a very high significant rate of fraud, they want to put a measure in place for authorization that the person really needs it. Because what they're finding is that the fraud entities out there, when somebody says, hey, you know what, I need catheters, there's been claims for thousands of catheters against a person that doesn't need them like that. They had a procedure, they ended up needing a catheter for a couple of days, maybe a week. You're not going to go through thousands of catheters in that period of time. So those are the things that's why that is trending. That's why they are looking at putting prior authorization on original Medicare. because to have it where you can go carte blanche, have anything done anywhere, whenever, however, all of that is no longer sustainable because of all of this dumb stuff that is happening. If you want to know about what is happening when it comes to fraud, you can look, and there are press releases on the regular, including a Facebook page that DOJ, OIG, CMS, and HHS all go ahead and promote issues about what is happening when it comes to fraud. You will see me, and you will see me post some of that occasionally. I also follow, if you don't follow Dr. Oz on social media, specifically on Facebook, you probably want to, because that's really good sharing information that you can repost. He just did one about all of the fraud activity and what they're doing to combat it, specifically what was it, 500 fraudulent hospice providers that are in LA. So those are things that you want to be aware of, right? So when we look at what's happening moving forward, all of this is shifting. They're looking at how to prevent and to stop all of this because candidly, it really hasn't been addressed before. And how they were addressing it before didn't really work. And they're owning the fact that the system has to be revamped, both on original Medicare as well as on Med Advantage. So when Doge came in and they started looking at processes and procedures and regulation and everything else, in July of last year, I posted a question that I asked. If you could redline and get rid of, I think I actually stood up and mentioned this when I was there last year. If you could redline any dumb regulation that you sit there and go, why the hell do I have to do this every day? This makes absolutely no sense. What would it be? And oh, I didn't want that one. Hold on a minute. Better. You could redline regulations, what would they be? Some of you said, I think the 48-hour rule on scope of appointments is absolutely stupid. You're right, it is. Or I think call recording's dumb. I don't get the disclaimer. Why do we have to have a disclaimer? Why do we have to have a disclaimer that's read inside of 60 seconds for everybody? Why is that even mandatory? Why do we have to keep call recordings for 10 years? You guys all had, there were 500 different things that comments that we got from the questions that I asked on social media. We put that together. We being NABIP, submitted a letter to CMS by their deadline that said, here's the 5 top things that we think are absolutely stupid that CMS requires an average agent to do. And we think that you guys need to get rid of them. And here's why. So we submitted that. NAIFA, National Association of Insurance and Financial Advisors, they submitted similar information, and so did HAFA. HAFA is Health Agents for America. So, which are the 3 major professional organizations that advocate for our industry. So now fast forward, that RFI and the information that we submitted was back in July. Guess what the proposed rule back in November comes back with and says, hey, you know what? We're taking a look at all of the comments and the things that have been said. We think you're right. What do you think if we go ahead and we get rid of some of this stuff? What do you think if we change some of this? They opened it up for comments. The final rule comes out. Actually, it came out on my birthday this year. Happy birthday to me. So I sat there and we sped read through, because that's what the Medicare Advisor Group does. We do not AI it. We actually open up the Federal Register. And it is a massive, massive document where we nerd out, and each of us takes a section and we read the legalese, which is oh so much fun. And we start looking at comparing notes. Are we reading the same thing? Are we interpreting the legal um, nature of the document and what they're saying correctly? And what exactly is in here that is now going to be set in stone for October 1 for a 1/1 effective? Now, when the final rule comes out, you need to understand there are two ways that that final rule gets flipped, or that there are changes to that final rule. One is an act of Congress, and the second one is by a federal court. Those are the only two ways to change what CMS puts in a final rule outside of going ahead and waiting until the following year when they decide to change their mind, which they often do. So, hoping that something is going to change on a final rule, you want to get those thoughts, suggestions, get in and submit once they set out the proposed rule. Yes, I get that it's in the middle of AEP and it's at the worst time ever. But if you don't do it on the front end and say and put in what your thoughts are about what is happening, it's too late. So this year, there's some really, really cool things that they went ahead and they did that will be implemented. So the first one is that they are going to go ahead and kill the 48-hour rule on the scope of appointment, which is fantastic. They are also going to have it where the scope of appointment can be used for a family or a husband and wife. So you don't need individual papers for each person. It can be multiple. The scope of appointment is based on in the 12-month rule on that scope of appointment. It is used rather than it be a single use paper. It is now going to, you can use that live scope of appointment until the point in time that you do the enrollment. That takes care of a lot of paperwork. So when you have somebody that's indecisive that needs 3 or 4 different meetings to discuss things, you don't have to worry about it. It's all, you can use the same scope over and over and over again. Here's the caveat when it comes to scopes. A scope is only good for the plan year. So if you're trying to get a scope right now at the end of April, thinking, oh, well, I can use an April scope in October for 27 benefits, the answer is no. Cannot do it. A scope is only good for the plan year that it is obtained. So you cannot start getting 27 scopes now. Cannot do it. You won't be able to do that until later in the year. Also, if you are doing an in-person face-to-face meeting, you have to have a paper scope. If you are doing a electronic meeting, you can use a digital or telephonic scope. So the rules surrounding a scope are very different now. What constitutes a scope is also changing. So where right now you're either pulling the scope of appointment off of your quoting and enrollment tool through Connexure or Sunfire, or you're getting it from your carriers. You can now use those, but there's also a myriad of other things that are now constituting as a scope of appointment. One of those being a consent to contact card. So, very different rules now surrounding what a scope of appointment is and how those are going to be utilized. The next thing that is changing is that this one is ping-ponged quite a bit, but you now will be able to take applications and do a marketing sales meeting after a education meeting. Clear the room. That's all you got to do. You know what? Say, you know what? I'm happy to go ahead and enroll any of you that are interested in signing up for a plan. But we're going to end this session right now. Give it about 5, 6 minutes so that that way everybody can go ahead and either ask their questions or exit. And then I'm happy to go ahead and enroll you and answer any questions that you may have. That's how I would handle it if you are doing events. And you'll be able to go ahead and then write the application immediately following the education. That is starting again in October. Disclaimer. This one y'all love. So the first thing when it comes to disclaimer is that you no longer have to do it inside of the first 60 seconds that you are talking to somebody. You can actually figure out what somebody needs before you do it. Shocker. Um, this is definitely going to go ahead and help. You do still need to have the disclaimer before you start talking about benefits and any kind of sales activity. But you can get a little bit further along in the conversation before you do that. And candidly, if you are going to change how you are doing that, I would wait until you know that the conversation is specifically about Medicare, and then I would be like, okay, you know what? The government is has some pretty stringent rules and regs regarding this. I do have to read you a quick disclaimer before we get started on talking about benefits. So just bear with me as I run through it, and then I would roll through that disclaimer in 2 seconds. The other thing that is changing is that SHIPs, the state volunteer people, will no longer be mentioned in the disclaimer. So when you take the AHIP in section 4, there will be a new updated disclaimer that will be there. Please make sure that you use it. It needs to be used verbatim. You cannot change it because you don't like how they say it. It must be in CMS language. I've seen quite a few people that are like, oh, well, I don't like how this is said, so I just made up my own. You can't do that. You have to do it with what the government says. But the ships people are no longer mentioned in it, and that is as a result of a report by JAMA last summer, that basically came out and said they're not reliable, which is pretty much what most everybody else thinks too. But they proved it, and that is why the government has pulled a lot of their funding and said, we can this can be done better. So those are the key things when it comes to the disclaimer. The next one is your call recording. So call recording is still there. You still need to do it. And I know a lot of you have an issue with that. And my answer to that, and I hate to say it, get over it. You deal with seniors, you deal with people that lose their memory and forget things. To protect your own business and your own sanity, record the calls. If you are not doing anything bad and you are not, trying to screw anybody over, it shouldn't be a problem with you recording these calls. But it will help you more often than not when the daughter comes to you and says, what did you do? Or if they forget and you need to have a conversation to politely remind them of a conversation or meeting that you had with that senior. And oh, by the way, it's only telephonic stuff that has to be recorded, but you should do it for your own protection. Now, the rules surrounding what is happening with the call recording, this is actually super cool. So one of the things that we submitted back in July is that it makes no sense to follow the rules that say that we have to hold on to recordings for 10 years. Makes no sense when some of these calls are 2 hours long, an hour, 2 hours long. The amount of it's just a lot of storage for 10 years for that, and the amount of calls that some people make. So we pushed back and said, we being MAG and NABIP, pushed back and went, this is stupid. Why are we going ahead and having to go ahead and save this stuff for 10 years when no carrier has gone any further than requiring and investigating 3 years? And I know that because I used to be a carrier rep for 14 years. I used to do the compliance side of this. So I know that that's what that is. And we also double check to see, is there any loophole somewhere that somebody knows of that has been longer than going after an investigation 3 years out, 3+ years out? And the answer was no. So we submitted it to CMS and said, this makes no sense. Cut down the 10-year period of time. We ideally want it to go, 6 is great, but 3 is even better. So what they did is they said, okay, we want you to hold audio recordings for 3 years. However, you will have an additional 3 years that you can change from an audio recording to a transcript using the AI technology and such so that it minimizes your storage and you have the information. So now technically you have 3 years of audio and 3 years of transcript for a total of 6 years of storage, and then you can kill it. And that is actually effective now. So any of your old stuff that you were holding, which it hasn't been around for 10 years, so you can't kill it with that. But anything because call recording came out 3 years ago. So we got a ways to go before we hit that 10-year storage mark. But when it happens, you now know that you can shift it so that way it's more manageable. Any questions on any of this? And I am almost at the hour, so that gives you all the high level stuff when it comes to the final rule, the history about why things are happening and how things are adjusting. I am doing a full training on this for 2 hours next Monday at 1 o'clock. You are welcome to join that, and I'm going to go into a deep dive about a lot of this stuff so that way we go into a little bit more of the weeds with it. Um, did I hear that the 27 Max is going to 2400? No. Last I heard it was 21 or 22. I'll have to verify, but it is not 24. Other questions?
Well, thanks, Amanda, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having all these updates, and I've not been I do vision insurance. I've not been on the medical side for 14 years. I am so out of touch with all these rules anymore.
Well, thank you for having me. For any of you that are on, feel free to follow me on social media, reach out at any point in time. Marcy and Teresa have my email and my contact information. You can also find it if you look up the Find an Agent on NABIP. I appreciate the feedback. If you have concerns and ideas, I'm all for listening to all of that as well. So I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Amanda. All right. We're right on the hour, so Lynn is up next for succession planning. And Lynn, you're on here, right?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're kind of not very loud, but I can hear you.
All right. Let me get my background there.
There you go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Yes.
All right. And while you do that, I'll do some reminders here. And just a quick reminder, there'll be a new CE link posted in the chat box that you'll need to complete for the second hour of continuing ed credits. And again, if your organization's firewalls prevent you from completing that form or polling questions, send your name and NPN to the chat box to the NABIP Iowa chapter. And another quick reminder of our nonprofit for 2026 starts right here. Will was our keynote speaker at the conference. And with that, I will introduce Lynn here and let her take it away. So Lynn is the co-owner of KHI Solutions, an agency specializing in health insurance for individuals, families, and small employer groups. KHI is headquartered in Fort Dodge with offices in Grimes and Arnold's Park. Prior to purchasing KHI in January of 2009, Lynn worked for Wellmark Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Iowa. She's a graduate of Iowa State University, has served on numerous boards over the years, and was recently inducted into the Iowa Insurance Hall of Fame. Lynn is married with 2 small dogs and lives in Granger. So with that, we'll let you take it away.
All right. Thanks, Teresa, and good morning, everybody. The engagement questions, by the way, I have a slide on, so I'll just trust that when I pop over to those, you guys will generate the question to make sure everybody's here. And I did 3 of them today. So,
Okay.
and actually, we'll start with the first one to make sure we've got everybody on board. And while you guys are responding to the first question of how many years have you been selling health insurance, I want to just make a comment that I realize that some people are taking this CE for the CE, and you're not an independent agent who owns their own book of business. So this is kind of directed at those that do, or maybe you're one that is interested in maybe acquiring a book of business and becoming an independent agent. So, because I realize some people, don't own their own books. So anyway, yeah, we'll go ahead with that question. And I think, Teresa, just to clarify for me, if it pops up, do I see it as well? So not sure. And you're muted. So
Lynn, you should hear it. This is Marcia, or see it. Sorry. You should be
Yeah,
able to
I'm
see it,
sorry.
but somebody will tell you if the questions pop up and you're still talking.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it didn't get
Well-
loaded. Michelle, our NABIP, Michelle Henneman's running our tech today, and she's been doing the questions.
I do not have those questions loaded. It's the poll, no.
So it looks like Lynn's got them in her presentation right here, and everybody's responding to them. So if we are recording and saving the chat, we should be able to go through and verify that people are responding to the question.
Absolutely, that works. Thanks, Marcy.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. So I'll go ahead. Hopefully everybody get that question answered. Okay, so I can move on to the next slide. We know you're here and you're with us. So stay plugged in at least, please, for 50 minutes. That's the requirement. All right, so here's our agenda for this morning. The next 50 minutes or so is as we talk about an independent agent being able to acquire or sell their books. I'm kind of looking at it actually in this perspective as somebody wanting to sell their book of business. And so we're going to kind of talk about what I call the what if game, and then considering your successor or who you might want to target to be your successor, and then how to evaluate your book of business, structure the deal, and then kind of dot the I's and cross the T's. So that's kind of what we're going to go over today. I've been, doing this with KHI for, I guess, I'm in my 18th year of doing this, and we've had several of these transactions that we do. And I really believe that, for an agent to have spent time building a book of business and then not doing anything with it, or letting it dwindle to the point where it's not worth much, or the market can change and all of a sudden the value of the business changes because of what's happening in the market. So I always encourage agents to please, please, please be thinking about your succession plan. And it's never too early to think about it because you never know what can happen. So let's jump right into the what if game, because this is really what I'm talking about. It doesn't really matter how old you are, how long you've been doing this, but my team laughs at me when I talk about getting hit by the proverbial bus. And what do you do when something like that happens? We hope that we get to actually plan for our own retirement in the time frame that we would like to do that, right? But things happen. There's accidents that happen. We just had, I know of an agent that just had a health situation. And when we as producing agents who are interfacing with our clients and have deadlines and have certain, especially during AEP, OEP, group renewals, we are required to be on, right? And if that can't happen, then what happens to our clients? Who do we have that might be in the wings? And maybe you've got a business partner and that would end up on them. And I have to laugh because I know Brenda and I've had conversations like, because something happens to you, I'm screwed, right? Vice versa. So for us to be planning and thinking about, what is our succession plan? What is your succession plan? Specifically, then we're going to talk about the book of business. So do you sell your entire book? Your entire business rather, or do you just sell your book of business, right? And those are really two different questions. I know when Brenda and I acquired KHI over 17 years ago, almost 18 years ago, we bought the whole business, which meant we're buying everything in the business, laptop, computers, everything, right? We're taking over all the bills and all that. But a lot of the deals that we've done with our agents, we're just selling books of business. We're selling a revenue stream, right? So, but you want to think about that because some of you have built a practice and you've got, assets, you've got a building, maybe you own the building, et cetera. So anyway, there's two different ways we could look at this. But generally for today, I'm really just talking about selling a book of business, right? That's what I think of when I think, wow, I've had a successful career. And one thing that drives me crazy, if you ever guys have known of a place like a restaurant. I knew a gal years ago and she just closed her restaurant. I'm like, what? Like you had no succession plan? Like you have a clientele, you have people that come to you, you have a brand. I mean, how do you just close the doors and you get nothing out of it, right? That makes me crazy to think about. Like you just, I can't believe that, right? So there is value to our business, clearly. Even as we navigate the changes that happen in the insurance world, there's a value to your business or to your book of business, to your clients, to your relationships, right? So I'm not going to monitor the chat, by the way. So thank you for NABIP team. And thanks again for the opportunity to do this today. It's just kind of near and dear to my heart. But if you guys would monitor the chat and it just bust in if there's a question, I'll try to pause at different times, especially when we do another engagement question. Feel free to pop in and help me ask some of the questions that might come in the chat. Unlike our prior speaker, I need slides and I don't look at the chat while we're going. So anyway, so let's keep going here. When we play the what if game, what could happen?
I got your back, Lynn, on those questions.
All right, gotcha. Thank you, Teresa. All right.
Yep.
So play the what if game, you guys. What if, and you guys know your own personal situation, so you know what could be the what if, but mine was always the bus, the accident, and obviously some kind of disability. Cancer is what all the talk is, it seems, lately in our world especially. I hope you're marketing cancer policies, making sure your clients have access to something because of the high rates of diagnoses here in Iowa with cancer. But I know I think about that, and what if I were to get cancer, and that I got to be focused then on my health, and I can't be taking care of my clients. So I think these are real things. Getting hit by the proverbial bus is somewhat silly, but you get the idea. That's when I can't do my job, what happens. And clearly death is another one. And a lot of people, I don't know, like, why don't people want to talk about that? It's a reality. It's coming for all of us. So I think we should talk about it, and many of us do sell life insurance, and that is a typical conversation we have. So anyway, I hope you're having that conversation either with yourself, your business partner, your spouse, family members. I know inside of KHI, I'll talk to an agent and I'll say, okay, does your spouse have any interest in your biz? Nope. Like, do you have any kiddos? Nope. Okay, what are we going to do? Anyway, and they at least better know who I am. So they know whoever your upline is, your spouse or family members ought to know. We had a case, you guys, I'm not kidding you. I think 6 months went by and a son took over a practice of a father who passed and nobody let us know. And I think 6 months went by, right? So like the point is, we need to let somebody know what's happening to those clients. That's kind of the bottom line. I said it earlier, I'll probably say it again, but what's happening to that client when something happens to you. Okay. So, here's, these are just to give you hopefully some ideas on how do you consider your successor. So could it be an in-house person? That means somebody already working inside of your practice. If you are a sole proprietor, a sole practice, solo in your gig, you're going to have to look external, right? So maybe you're looking at a similar agency, maybe somebody that you've done some partnering with on some work. It could be a general agency like KHI or many of the others in the market that you go to and say, hey, do you have a plan? What's the plan? I don't have a plan. Can you help me? And I do spend a lot of time in my day talking with agents. I mean, hello, we're not getting any younger, right? So what is your plan? And so I certainly through KHI offer those services. Like that's just what we do to help you figure out what to do. Some of you may consider a large company acquisition. That's happened for a lot of folks across Iowa and across the country where, hey, I know there's a large company that probably would be interested in buying me. That's fine, you know, if that's kind of the direction that you want to go. But these are the conversations, you know, that really need to be had. I think also when I talk about capacity, you know, I think about like the size of a book of business, and do I have the right, in my succession plan, do I have the right people that can handle what I do and my book of business? So I'll give you an example. I had a gal that had a book of business and it was her alone. That book gets acquired and there is no way one person really can handle that business. You could lose your mind. I mean, many of you, you didn't lose your minds, but you really were pressed this last AEP or OEP based on not only in the under 65 space, the changes that happened there with regard to the enhanced premium tax credits, or in the Medicare space and the craziness that went on there. And if you were on the prior CE, which I was, hearing Amanda talk about the craziness, and the note I wrote is not good, right? It's going to continue to be, let's see, I wrote that somewhere, but it's going to continue to be chaotic. I think yes, turmoil is the word I wrote down on my notes. AEP turmoil looks like it will continue not only in the Advantage space, but in the Medicare space. So my point is in thinking about a successor, thinking about capacity and how they're best able to take care of your clients. I think the last one I think is important too is local presence. You know, we've heard of companies, and not even just in health insurance, but companies in general that acquire a business locally, and sometimes they end up closing down that office and they just pull it into a call center or pull it into another larger location. Most people know in our business, you don't do that. When you have local clients, you need a local presence, right? But you need to think about that when somebody comes in. I have a family member I know whose company, not in the health insurance business, was acquired. When you get maybe some venture capitalists that come in and acquire a business, a lot of times this can happen. They're looking at the bottom line. Are they always looking at what's best for your clientele? And I think for a lot of us that have really built a business or grown a business, and it's kind of our baby, right? We kind of put our stamp on it. Like it's been part of us for so much of our lives. You know, having that local presence and continuing on the legacy that you started. So I think in trying to find that match, it's going to be somebody that, you know, is going to be like-minded, so that, you know, they would treat the clients the way you do. They would want to be present. They would have office hours, or they could come in and see you, kind of thing, and work the way maybe you work. So it's hard, right? I mean, it is hard when you try to find somebody that could be like you and do the job like you would do it. And I will tell you, sometimes that's a hindrance to folks. Sometimes we wait so long trying to find that perfect person that you think you need, and you miss the mark, right? And so, you can't wait so long because life happens, and then all of a sudden that will happen. I think one thing, and I'm going to say it here because I don't think I have it on any other slide, but I knew of an agent who, I will just say, I think had some trust issues. So when I say that, it means, well, I might have this company that I have this product with, and then I have this upline for this product and this upline for this product. And we don't want to have too much of my business all in one basket. I understand that, right? It makes it a little more complex. And what happens is when the proverbial bus comes or life takes a different turn that we didn't expect, it makes it a lot more difficult to try to get your arms around that business, because guess what happens with most carriers, and I know I can say this with certainty for Wellmark anyway, just knowing their policies, is if something happens to an agent, they're going to go to that spouse and say, what's happening? What do you want to do with this business? And I think that's really nice. But the spouse, if that agent hasn't kept the spouse up to date on what's happening, and many don't, you guys, I'm shocked by this. Many don't talk to their spouses about their business. Maybe the spouse or family member has no interest. But if you've got business spread out throughout wherever, it's really hard to try to pull that all together under one roof so that now that business can be sold. Because when it's here, there, and everywhere, it's super hard. So I just make that point for those that, again, you want to buy a business, you're going to go, well, where's your business at, right? We'll get it in one place, right? That makes it easier, perhaps. Well, again, I'm just throwing out ideas and things that I've experienced. So things for you to consider and think about. Let's go over to the next page here about considering your target. So this is similar to finding your successor, right? But when you try to consider your target, and we're looking at that location, as I kind of mentioned, you're looking at the lines of business, you're looking at the similar values, and whether or not it's a strategic fit. So I made a comment on some of these in the prior slide, but I think I just can't emphasize enough when you consider who might be that great fit, to also be talking to them about that. I think when you have a conversation with someone to say, hey, I'm looking to I remember when Brenda and I bought the business, and I was concerned about getting hit by the bus, 15, 18, 17 years ago, whatever. I remember reaching out to a few people and just saying, hey, if something were ever to happen to me, please reach out to Brenda, right? You'd be a good one, right? I think that would work, right? But just having some of those, and they seem kind of maybe innocuous, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen to me kind of thing. But I think we really do have to have that consideration that something could happen. I'll just share one other thing. This is kind of a side note as well. But I know with Brenda and I, there were times where, we realized we should not fly in the same plane together. And so we started, anytime we had to fly somewhere, we made sure we flew on different airlines. Now, what's the likelihood that, our plane's going to go down? It never happened. It still hasn't happened in almost 18 years, but you never know, when something could happen. And that would, you guys, if you were the one and it was you and your business partner and you're flying somewhere and you're both gone, now what do you do? Because you had your business partner as your successor, and your business partner might have had you as a successor. So just another thing to maybe think about.
Hey, Lynn.
I do see a poll question.
Yep,
Yeah.
perfect. I was just going to interject on that and let you know that a question did just pop up. And then, yes, you said that to Tracy and I a long time ago. And now we do try not to travel and get on airplanes together. So we do appreciate that thought, because that was not something that we had thought about previous to you mentioning that. So anyway, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, and I do have another one, and a question built in on the next slide. But I think what I'll do is, I'll wrap up here on this slide. We'll go to the next slide, and just for fun. So I don't know that anybody cares to type it into the chat, my next question, but as we kind of wrap up on considering your target, I would just say, don't forget too, when you're let's say your practice is going fine, but you may have kind of a runway, kind of what I'll call an entrance ramp for that person. And so maybe it's somebody that you've got your eye on and you bring in, and I've seen this in the investment field a little bit more maybe than in health insurance, but bringing in that junior player. So you have your eye on somebody, and it could be a family member. I know I thought that at one point, probably, I don't know how many years ago now, I thought, wow, maybe there's one of my family members that wants to step in and kind of do what I do and take over. And that never came to fruition, by the way. But no, when you think about that planning, maybe you think about bringing somebody into your practice and you get them licensed, and then you start to train them in, and you see if that could work out and be somebody. So now they are in-house, and it's just something maybe you've never thought about before. I've always done this on my own, but maybe bringing somebody in, and then the cool thing, and of course you got to look and see if you can cash flow it, but kind of a neat thing on that one is maybe you get to just slow down a little bit, So maybe you don't really have to retire, because I swear, I think there's some people that know, we love what we do. I love this business, right? Can I just slow down? So if I can hire somebody else in and just slow down, and then when I finally kick the bucket, ultimately the business just slides over to this person that I've brought in and have trained all these years. So anyway, just some things, and I think it's common sense there, some of the things I have listed. Okay, so the next slide is now, let me just make sure I can get here to the next slide, is what health insurance market is your favorite? And maybe it's not your favorite, but it's the one you are in. I mean, I know a lot of people that maybe are frustrated in the Medicare market right now. So, when we look at the individual market being under 65, over 65, and then we kind of look at small and mid-sized group, and great, they just plugged the question up. So I love it. We'll get the results then. That's terrific. But yeah, is it small or mid-sized group or large group? So, think about this too, and this kind of ties right into succession planning, because depending on your market, and I didn't even plug in some of the other things you might do, right? Some people do P&C and some people do investment work and things like that. But I'm just really targeting here on the health insurance side. But, one of the questions when we survey our agents every year, we ask, do you want to get into a new market, maybe that you haven't been in before? Because a lot of times, especially if you can remember back, if you've been doing this a while, what got you into the business? And some people will say, oh, it was the group business, right? That's what got me, or whatnot. But here we can at least see the results, which is kind of cool. So favorite, it looks like the leader there is small, mid-sized group. And you know what? I'm seeing kind of an uptick in interest in small group over the individual market a little bit. And right, usually I see it's like 50-50, honestly, at least in our experience, right, at KHI. There's just a lot of interest. Some really, kind of move toward the individual and market, and some towards group. But maybe you guys, I don't know if it's because of what's happening in those markets right now with, obviously the ACA market is a smaller percentage of the overall market. I always say it's less than 10%. And then you have the other 45%-ish in Medicare and in the group market, right? So just from a national perspective, so you're not going to have as much opportunity in the under 65 space, but some people, that's how they've built their career, is in the under 65 space. And then they maybe decide, maybe I should branch into Medicare. But again, with all of the issues, the compliance and everything going on in these markets, I think a lot of people have said, maybe I'll migrate over to the small group space. Anyway, so thanks for adding that question in, you guys. Okay, so let's go over into now kind of like how you evaluate your book of business. So everybody might have their ideas on how to do this, but before we can get to how we evaluate the book really monetarily, is to really look at what the lines of business are. When we look at, I'll just use Brenda and I for an example, when we look at acquiring a book of business, I mean, we do look and go, well, what have you got? Like, open Pandora's box and let's see what's inside. A lot of times, we're just thinking of the health insurance block. That's all we do. Like, we don't get into the other things. We don't get into the P&C. We don't get into the investments. Even, I mean, life insurance, right? It's really limited to maybe some easy term stuff, but really, right? Then that's usually paid up front. We'll do life on a group chassis, of course, right? And some of the disability, but really, again, our focus, you know, in the individual market for sure is health only. And then in the group market, we do branch into some of those other properties, but it's all on a group chassis. So it's all tied to group health. But when you think about your book of business and how much business you have, you need to quantify it, right? And if you haven't quantified it for a while, that's where you get, you know, call your GA, call KHI if you're with us, call your GA if you're with somebody else, and just say, send me a report of all my book of business. Yeah, you guys get a commission statement. So I a lot of times layer that. I'll say, okay, you know, I want my book in Excel so I can do some sorting of that, or I want my commission statement in Excel so now I can sort and I've got the money there that's with it. And again, if you're with multiple uplines, if you will, right, you've got to do that multiple times versus having it in one spot. But, you know, take a look at what you actually have, because a person that might be interested in acquiring your book is going to ask this, what do you have? Because they're going to have their level of expertise, or their maybe where their heart is and what they really enjoy with health insurance. And so it's good that you quantify that and say, yeah, well, a majority of my book is under 65. And this person goes, I hate that business, or, you know, or whatever. Same on the Medicare, because, you know, and we've had this happen where somebody talks about their over 65 business and go, well, it's a majority Med Advantage. Well, oh my goodness, right? Okay, that just means there's going to be, you know, let's use that word, a little more turmoil perhaps in that over 65 space, you know, with rate increases. When Amanda said that, and I wrote that down, I was like, had been in maybe the 5% national average rate a couple years ago to over 15% rate increases. And we're seeing it, you guys, we're seeing them in the 20s, right? 25% rate increase on these med subs. So, and the Med Advantage cutting benefits, cutting plans, leaving counties. So good to know what is my opportunity there in the Medicare space, and what are some of the, I'll say, gotchas, right? The group space, again, I mean, dealing with, you know, the things we're hearing, and I know we talked about this just at the conference last week, like whether it's fully insured, level funded, self-funded, captive, are you looking at ICRAs? What are you doing in that group space? Those are group conversations. Even though the ICRAs have individual plans, it's a group conversation. So what does your group book look like? And I have to laugh because, you guys, if they're all groups of one or two, nobody wants it, right? Sorry, right? But nobody wants it. And seriously, when Brenda and I evaluate a book of business, we'll just look at it and say, yeah, we're not buying the groups of one or two. And as you guys know, Becky Woody just joined our ownership team. And so really, it's Becky, Brenda, and I will look at a book of business and make that determination about what we're willing to pay for and what we're not. And many times, you guys, here's the person. So again, if you're looking to maybe acquire a book, maybe that's you that's got your angle on this call versus the agent that would need to have a succession plan and get out from under their book. But you can definitely, you know, say, I'll service it, which is kind of what we say. I'll service it, but I am not going to pay for that business, because we know we don't make any money on that business, and we do it usually as a favor to our groups, or on the hope that they'll grow. And it does happen. A group of one can become a group of 5, and then 10, and then, or just a group of 3, and we at least get more comp, right? Or with UHC, it might be a group of 6. I need to get it up there over that 5 threshold. I forget. Each carrier is just a little bit different. Anyway, and then what's my level funded business, right? Do I have any? Is there opportunity for that? So these are all the questions that somebody's going to want to know if they are going to acquire your book. So if you're going to sell it, you really need to have your arms around that. I think the other angle that I like to share around property and casualty, and I'm going to pivot here on this for just a second, is sometimes I think P&C agents and agencies, they're willing to grab that health book because they want to market other products to that health book. So they might not be as concerned about, oh, woe is me, what's happening in this Medicare space, or, oh, wow, we didn't get our enhanced premium tax credits. They might be, and we'll talk about how you buy the book in just a little bit, and just make sure I'm staying on track here. But you know, the P&C space, as you guys know, there's many of you write P&C, and there's money to be made in that space, both commercial P&C as well as that, I call it that retail or kind of residential P&C space as well. So don't sell your book short, right? Because again, like I said earlier, these are client relationships, right? And I don't know that I'll mention it later, so I'm going to mention it now while I'm thinking about it. But when you think about how do I explain to a client, right? Maybe I've found somebody, I've targeted somebody, I've identified all this business, the person that is going to be my successor and take over my book of business, maybe they do market P&C. So explaining and having that letter that gets written about how do you introduce this new person, and we've got ideas on that, and that I don't know that I'll have time to talk about it, so I'll kind of hold that and remind me if you have questions on that in the end about how do you explain this. And we've got ways to do that to try to keep the retention, because right, and we're going to talk about structuring the deal, but a lot of times, you know, hey, this is the price, this is what I'll pay, or this is what I want for it, this is the price, and you negotiate that, and then what happens when clients leave? Because there's a whole retention strategy that you need to think about. And so I think about as P&C, if you were to acquire a business and get some of those clients, maybe market to them other products, that could be the win-win, right? And that's why I think some of these acquisitions can pay a little bit more when there's an upside to selling other products and then keeping them really sticky so that they stick around. Sticky and stick around. Okay. The other products there I'm listing around life, disability, ancillary products, you know, I think, again, wrapping your arms around that. I will tell you, Brenda and I, Becky, again, the three of us will not pay for life insurance. So we kind of go, oh, wait, and even, I don't have it listed on here, but even long-term care policies. Ugh, okay, we don't specialize in that. We refer folks to Rhonda, who does that, you know, for our agency. You may do it, your upline may have a resource. That's great. But long-term care, you talk about turmoil or maybe volatile is the better word for long-term care insurance. So, but think about the things that are in that book of business that may or may not carry value, but what is of value is the client relationship. So again, I'll go back to maybe I'm not going to pay for that. I'm pulling that revenue stream out of my calculation, but I will service it because it's a client that I can maybe market other products to, right? And I think duplicating clients with products, that's an important part to understand in a book of business. So when I get my book, I can then sort it by client so I can see what client has multiple products already with me. Oh my goodness. You know, they've got, oh yeah, I've got their medical, I've also got their dental, their vision, and I do have some life insurance or long-term care, okay? So I guess I've stressed enough the need that you have to get your arms around your book, because your person is going to want to know, what am I getting into here? What do I need to get contracted with if I'm not already? What carriers do I need to get contracted with? What am I willing to pay for? Or maybe I just service it and we don't pay for that. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. All right. So, and now, and again, I'll just kind of pause again, if there's any questions that have come in that are relevant to that slide I'm on. If not, I'm going to keep plowing ahead here. So I think the next one, and probably you could say it's the most important one, because it's how do I value the book of my business, right? Or my company, how do I value it? And so I can just kind of give you just a little kind of what Becky and Brenda and I do. And this is just really what we do, because we aren't going to be, we don't want to haggle on, okay, well, we could do this or we could do that, and then like negotiate and cutthroat. It's kind of like, we think this is fair, and so here's what we do. And so, so I'll just tell you, like, I guess that it is what it is. And sorry, Becky or Brenda, if I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. Because I mean, that's what you get from us, is we're pretty much cards on the table, and it's not a trade secret. So we just generally would say, look, what's easy for us is we just take a multiplier times the revenue or the commission that's generated. Now, as I said earlier, we may not pay for certain products. Well, here's a good one. Let's say that like Blue Cross is the only company paying on PDPs anymore, but we will just say we just don't pay for PDPs. Why? Is it obvious, right? They're a pain in the butt. We usually don't get paid on them, but if it's in your revenue stream, we're not paying for that. Will we figure out how to service it? Yes. So we'll come in and we'll just say we'll pay 2 times the value of your book, or excuse me, the revenue or commission that's generated from your book. That's really how we go at it, right? So, and we just go, take it or leave it, right? And so now, are there other points of negotiation? Absolutely, and we'll get into that, I think, on the next slide. But I just want to say, like, you know, you could hear somebody go, I'll pay you 1 times your revenue. I'll pay you 1.5. I'll pay you 2. I'll pay you 2.5. I'll pay you 3. And that, you know what, if money is the only thing that matters to somebody, then, right, then if I could hold out, if I'm trying to sell my book of clients, right, I could just hold out and say, I want 3 times. That's what I think it's worth. So let's say I generate $100,000 a year in health insurance revenue. I want 300 grand. All right, then knock yourself out, go find the buyer, right? Then you may end up losing some things. I don't think you can probably have it all. You might say, well, they're going to go, great, because we're going to grab that. I'll pay you 3 times and we're closing your office down and I'm not hiring any of your people and I'm going to run this business out of XYZ state. Okay, so if that's what is interested, you know, if that's what you're interested in and that's what you want to do. But I'm trying to kind of paint a picture here of some of the other things you want to take into account besides just how much money I can make on my book of business. So Brenda and Becky and I think 2 times the average revenue. And so we work that up. We model that because, as you know, commissions can change over time. Especially, I'm taking a risk because if I'm going to pay you 2 times your revenue, I maybe am not having a factor in there with regards to any clawback if we lose business. What if everybody leaves? What if the government changes something and all of a sudden, you know, I'm not getting paid anymore on that business, right? Generally speaking, the business ought to cash flow the payment. So generally speaking, you know, let me do a scenario for you on I'll say 2 times the revenue and a payout over 4 years. For example, that would just be 50% of that commission run for 4 years, right? It's kind of easy. And I'll tell you, KHI facilitates a lot of these payments. Then people don't have to go to the bank. They're getting an ongoing revenue stream. There's a revenue stream that's coming in now. If I'm the person taking over that book, I'm going to get the revenue stream. So I'm going to get that 100,000, right, a year. So if I'm going to pay somebody 200,000, I can afford to pay them $50,000 a year for 4 years. Now, maybe again, and again, we'll get to the next slide of talking about interest, but I'm just talking kind of high level and make it easy peasy. This is the concept, right? So we like it. It's easy. X times the revenue, and generally it's 2 for us, but I've seen it go lower and I've seen it go higher. So we're about being fair, but we also realize there might be, you know, the retention. We might have some loss. We keep a very close eye on it. We do everything we can, and we can certainly talk more about that as well if time permits. The other way that companies value, and I'm going to say a business probably over the book, because now you're talking about a multiplier of EBITDA. So that's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, right? So this really, to me, is all about, I'm selling my entire practice. That includes my computers and my desk and my chairs and everything, right? It could be my other employees, but I'm selling everything, not just a book of business. And to me, that's different. When Becky and Brenda and I look at buying a book of business, we are not looking to buy the agency. but companies out there are, right? That we know that, and so they may pay a multiplier of EBITDA. It could be, I've heard, this is what I've heard in the market, maybe you've heard it as well, probably anywhere from 6 to 9 times EBITDA. So it was funny because it's like, then what's my EBITDA? It's a number. So you have to work with your accountants, excuse me, to determine what your EBITDA is, and then you can apply a factor. So go on the low side, go on the high side, and go, okay, so that could be what my entire business is worth, everything, right? And again, don't forget, there's a brand that normally people are buying, generally speaking, right? They want your brand, they want what you've built. So anyway, those are the 2 ways. Again, at KHI, we like to be simple, and we're usually just buying a book. We're not buying an entire agency. We're buying a revenue stream. And I think the other reason why it's nice to work with somebody that'll help finance that is because banks are funny about loaning money for, they call it blue sky. It's revenue that's to come on a promise. You can't hold it. I have never held. Okay, you can hold an insurance policy, like you can hold paper in your hand, but it's a promise to pay on a policy. And, you know, in essence, really, I don't own the policy, the client does. And the client is promising to pay their premium, so I get paid, right? So it's a funny little thing. So when you can find someone like the buyer that's willing to finance it, it's a little helpful. I'll just say that. Okay. So let's talk about structuring the deal. So this one, we've done so many deals and we've done them. I think each one has been really different, and we can get creative. As much as I just said, let's make it simple and let's just do 2 times the annual revenue stream, right? And we model it out and, you know, and go, okay, here's how much it's going to make next year. Here's what it did this year. And we try to be somewhat smart. As you guys know, with some policies, they go down over time. Medicare supplement is a great example. If my book is all Medicare supplement, it's going to go down over time. At some point, it's going to be really low, but I want to make sure I get my ROI prior to that, right? If I'm the buyer, I want to get my return on that investment. So splitting commission over a period of time, I kind of went through that in an example, right? And what the seller likes, you like, what I would like is, okay, you're going to give me, and let's use my $100,000 and $200,000 example. My book generates $100,000 a year in commissions, and my person that is going to acquire that has agreed to pay me $200,000. And a lot of people will say, yes, please, I don't want a check for $200,000 because I guarantee you'll probably be kicked into a higher tax bracket. Well, not necessarily a higher tax bracket, excuse me, that would be a capital gain. So you're going to pay capital gains tax. And maybe you'd rather pay capital gains tax a little as you go and not pay a big lump sum up front. So that's kind of, you know, not only is it easier for the purchaser to finance it, right, to just split a commission, split that cash flow, but it's also perhaps better for the seller because they then won't have a big tax burden, right, if they get the money all at once up front. So that split over a period of time tends to work out really, really well. We've had really good luck with that. But another could be that we want to acquire it with cash. So I'm going to acquire that book. I am going to either write out a check, or I'm going to go to the bank or utilize my line of credit at the bank if I'm the one acquiring it, and they want a cash payout, and they maybe they don't want it all up front, but they may want a down payment. So a lot of times when we sign a purchase agreement, we'll do a down payment when the purchase agreement is signed and give them a little something, something, right? And then we could do monthly payments. After that, we could do a down payment and then a final payment upon when it closes, when the actual effective date is. I had one that was, I want this much year 1, and then I want this much year 2, and that helps from a tax perspective. But I also can work in there kind of I'll not really call it a run out, but if you think about what a run out is usually referring to is, what's that retention rate? Is the book still intact? As you know, and I think I'll get to this on my last slide as we talk about kind of dotting the I and crossing the T, it's really about making sure you're not going to sell this book and turn around and go open a new insurance agency, put a new shingle out, and then start marketing to those same clients. And because obviously I just bought that business, so there's going to be some information, and again, we'll talk about that on the next slide. But what you really want to think about, though, is how much at risk is this book of business? I know in looking at, we acquired some group business, and we looked at, okay, when's the renewal? When's the renewal? Can we make an introduction? You know, we're going to be now partnering. This kind of gets into some of the language on how we explain what's happening here. But if we feel comfortable that I know this agent, I know this person. So again, knowing them, I think that's when we have more confidence in being able to write that check or agree to this down payment and then another year payment, maybe a year later or over several months. Again, you guys, I mean, seriously, it can be as flexible as you need to make the deal. And I think you can have a factor in there around retention of the book of business. And I know we just did a deal recently, and it was interesting because we were renewing a case, going to renew a case. We were helping that agent. Okay, we were their upline, right? And so we were helping them renew, and they ended up not renewing. Okay, I don't know if they caught wind. I don't know what happened, right? That's why you try to keep these deals a little close to the chest, because competitors will make hay. You know, they'll try to take advantage of a situation perhaps, but we were able to then remove that case from the acquisition. In fact, let's go over to the final slide here, because I think, I've got a few more minutes, and I think we started just a hair late, and so I think I might just run just a little past 50 minutes. But I think this one is important on the dot the I and cross the T. So let's do these couple last slides, right? So generally, you're going to start with a letter of intent. That's the best way to do it. And we've got some templates, right, that we share with agents that we work with that just don't know where to go with this. And certainly, you can hire an attorney. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have an attorney. I think a lot of times, though, with drafting the letter of intent, which would include, this is a big one, a confidentiality agreement, also an agreement that you won't consider any other offers. My letter of intent is, I want to work with you on this deal. I'm not going to now start going to talk to anybody else. Maybe you had prior to this point, but when you sign that letter of intent, you're saying, I will keep this confidential. I will not consider any other offers. And then there's usually a deadline, like I sign it now, and this is good for 6 months, 3 months, 2 months, whatever it would be, because that then leads into a purchase agreement. And we have, again, some template kind of sample copies of that. But then the purchase agreement really is, what am I buying? When am I buying it? And how much am I paying for it, right? So obviously there's more to it than that. It would be nice if it was just that simple. And as I said earlier, you know, Becky, Brenda, and I were just like, I would just do it on a handshake if I could, because my word means my word. And that's the kind of people we like working with, is people that, but we need attorneys, things can get sideways, things happen in people's lives. So we have to have that. So it's usually a good idea, I think, once you complete a purchase agreement, to probably run that by your attorney and go, does this look pretty good? I don't know. Brenda and Becky and I are a little frugal, I would say, right? And Brenda says, hey, I think we can do some of this and not have to send it to our attorney yet. So you save maybe a little bit of money. Then you have them review what you've put together. Because you guys, a lot of this is, you can get it online. Right? These are boilerplate type agreements, but we've kind of made ours so it's more health insurance, obviously focused. Okay, but let's go to the next slide, because here's where there's a lot. After you then have a purchase agreement, and then let's just say, and this is exactly what happened. We had a purchase agreement in place with somebody, then we lost one of the cases, and we hadn't closed on the deal yet. Because what happens is, when we close, now you're like, okay, what's really still in force, like right now today? And so think about this, you guys. When you set a date to do this, you don't want to probably do it like October 1. Why? If I'm buying a book of business and then it's actually going to be, I'll, close October 1 or October, I don't even know, make up a date that sounds goofy because a lot of stuff happens effective 1/1. Like I want to see what's still on the books 1/1. So I may want to close either way prior, like, okay, way prior to that fourth quarter. So maybe I'm going to close in June, or so I've got time, right? If I'm the buyer to, get to know the client, introduce us, blah, 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 and not do it on the heels of fourth quarter. Likewise, when I close on that business to see what's still in effect, I probably want to do that after a big date, like October 1 or January 1, right? Like, oh my gosh, that's when all this stuff, happens in terms of, whether it's groups. Again, you might have renewal dates all over the place, but maybe the majority of my groups renew January 1, along with Medicare, along with under 65. So keep in mind, like that addendum then says, hey, are there any changes to our original purchase agreement? Here's how we're structuring the payments, right? It could be with interest. So you're getting down into some of the details, then maybe that the payment dates on how we want to do that, what the closing or effective date is. So when we close, then this deal goes into effect. And I had one deal we did, it was really interesting. Okay, split that money out over 5 years. And so we were doing a split and we really just agreed to X dollar amount. We knew we could cash flow it, X dollar amount every month for 5 years. But it was great because when she took that to her attorney came back, and actually it could have been her financial advisor as well. I think she showed it to both, and she should have. And they said, okay, I get you got 5 years, but let's put a mark in there. They need to start paying interest on this monthly amount. If they don't pay it off by year 3, then we worked in some interest, right? And the neat thing then we just went ahead and wrote out the check. And also, here's another one, you guys. Does it prohibit you from paying it off early? So we had another situation where we were prohibited from paying it off early. So therefore, we were stuck at paying the interest on the deal for that period of time. So these are like a little bit more getting down into the nits and gnats, but that's where an attorney and a financial advisor are super helpful. And then we, of course, present, and the addendum, a lot of times we'll email it ahead of time, but go, here's what we're doing. Okay, and now, so we're going to present at closing following a verbal agreement. So we send the addendum ahead of time. And then I don't know about you, but this day of electronic pushing funds, money goes, there's still something special about getting together and presenting a check or presenting a signed copy or whatever it might be. Oh, and don't forget, oh goodness, the list of clients. Okay, that's an exhibit, the final valuation, that's fine. But oh my goodness, do not forget, and it's usually in the purchase agreement somewhere, and it can be on the addendum, you better collect all the scope of appointments. And Amanda was just talking about this and how long we have to hang on to this stuff. There's client folders or client lists, client details, scope of appointments, call recordings. I know this can happen. I mean, you hope it doesn't happen, but now you become the new person that owns this book of business, and all of a sudden the carrier comes down, and Wellmark is a good one that does this. They're very diligent about, and all of a sudden they randomly choose somebody to get looked at for compliance. I need a copy of your scope. If you had a call, was done call recording, then I need a copy of the call recording. It's like, oh, I just bought this book of business. Where is it, right? So I didn't want to forget that, but that's another thing that you have to think about is I need all that data. And if in your process of looking at buying that book of business, you need to ask them that, do you have this information? Because if you have it, great. If you don't have it, that could be the deal breaker. I had a buyer that one time said, forget it. I'm not buying that book. A lot of times I'll play matchmaker. I'll put two people together, right? And that buyer goes, if you don't have those documents, I'm not taking the risk on that. Or what could you do? I'm going to pay you less then if you don't have it, because I'm going to carry that risk and burden. And that might impact me and my ability to market. So anyway, all right. Well, I see we're kind of coming up on the end. I think we have one last question. And whether you answer this or not, maybe this is more rhetorical. And if we need another question for the CE part of it, y'all can go ahead and do that. But my question to you is, do you have a successor in mind? If you own your own business, do you have a successor in mind? So I just thought that was just kind of a fun question to end on. and then see if if we have time for any questions that anybody might have of me. And you can always get a hold of me, guys. Shoot me an email. You may have a unique situation. You really don't want to bring it up in front of anybody else. Just shoot me an email if you would, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. You guys, as long as you're a member of NABIP or you went to the conference and you're here on the CE, you're my audience. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to help out and answer.
That was very informative, Lynn. It's a lot of things to think about if you are purchasing either the book of business or the entire business.
Thanks.
A lot of things I never would have thought about, but I don't own my own business either, so I'm not seeing any questions, just that you rock. And we always, Lynn, we always appreciate your support of NABIP. You and Brenda and Becky have always been a great supporter of NABIP, and we truly appreciate that. Not only at the conference, but throughout the year and the golf outing and everything. So, we've only got 3 minutes left, but we give you 3 minutes back of your day. Thanks today to everyone that took the time to join us. As a reminder, our next virtual breakout session is on Thursday of this week, April 30th from 9 to 11. So please be sure to join us, and don't forget about our golf outing Thursday, July 16th at Beaver Creek. Registration is now open for that. If you were at the conference, they had a registration form at the table. If not, you can go to the NABIP-IA website and register. We will look forward to seeing you there in person. So again, thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't do these programs and conference and golf events without all of your support. So I think we're good for the day. Again, thank you, Lynn, for being here with us.
Yeah.